Hello, welcome to LM Teaches English. In this video I'm going to talk you through the poem Bayonet Charge by Ted Hughes, which is from the AQA Power and Conflict anthology. So what we'll do, as always, is I will ask you to read the poem first, so if you haven't done so, please do that now. And then come back to the video, and then we will go on to talk about the title, the poet, so that we're covering our assessment objective 3, and then I've got some key quotes here for you which we will look at to help us understand the meaning of the poem and also the writer's use of language, which is your AO1 and AO2, and then finally we'll look at some poems that compare well, and I'll give you a question that you can answer, which comparison is also AO1. So, first of all then, we've got here Bayonet Charge. Now you may remember the word bayonet from your lessons, and a bayonet is a type of weapon which is basically a sort of gun with a knife on the end of it, or a sword. So if you don't visualise that, I'd recommend Google imaging it because it'll come up straight away and that'll just help you understand. So these were weapons that were used in World War I when the guns, or for whatever reason, were not very good, either at close range or they would take a long time to load up. So the soldiers would switch over to the knife in order to attack or kill. So the bayonet charge implies that they're on the move and they're running towards the enemy and fighting. So we can also figure out dates it to World War I. So if you know a little bit about war poetry, you'll know that World War I was around the time when war poetry tended to be a bit more honest and from the point of view of the soldiers. Interestingly, this poem was actually written later on, a lot later after the war. Ted Hughes was actually poet laureate in the, I want to say 70s and 80s, but you can double check that as well. And he didn't actually fight in the war. He was in the RAF for a time, so he would have known sort of the ins and outs and had the training and things. But it was his father fought in the war, so he got stories from his father and ideas from that. As I said, the word charge implies there's going to be some kind of attack, and also that it's going to be fast pace. Okay, so the poem itself is actually about a soldier, as we said with the title, who is charging towards the enemy with his bayonet in his hand. And he, as the poem goes on, we understand that he's a little bit bewildered, he's a bit kind of unsure what he's doing there. Similar ideas to exposure, apart from this is actually right in the action. As the poem goes on, we understand that he also feels like he's been lied to by his government, and he feels like, you know, he was told probably by propaganda or by the higher ups that fighting in this war would be honourable, but actually it's not that at all. It's grim and gruesome and blimmin' scary, probably. So let's get going with some key quotes that I've picked out then. So obviously the first line of this poem is really useful. We start with the adverb suddenly, which, you know, when you're reading a horror story or when a writer's trying to get tension, is often used. But it's interesting because it's used in the first line, and this is actually called on media res, and all that means is we begin right in the middle of the action. So there's no faffing and building up. This poet has got us right in the action, probably to make us as a reader feel how the soldiers would have felt. So straight away we feel empathetic because we are also in the middle of the action, as is he. He awoke is interesting because does this imply that he was asleep and he had to get up quickly and attack? Does it imply that perhaps he was daydreaming? Maybe that's the wrong word, but he could be overtired, daydreaming maybe of better times, and then suddenly he realises where he is and he's actually in the middle of a charge. And then running, of course, to imply the fear, the adrenaline perhaps. But straight away we get this feeling that he doesn't want to be there. We've got the next quote I've picked up, stumbling across a field. So stumbling, he's not very well trained. He's unprepared, perhaps, which raises the question: can anybody be really prepared for this kind of fighting? Also, perhaps implies that he's nervous. And again, he just doesn't want to be there. So stumbling across a field towards a green hedge that dazzled with rifle fire. So we have here this image of the green hedge, perhaps towards nature, towards safety. But even this nature, this greenery is overcome with rifle fire. And this is a theme that continues later on in the poem as well, this idea of innocence, innocent things also being, dying, as well as humans who've signed up for this. We've also got innocent people in the crossfire who didn't deserve this. The word dazzled is very interesting because dazzled obviously has positive connotations. Dazzling with light, something quite beautiful. But it could also be dazzling, can also be shocked or kind of overcome with the beauty. He was dazzled by her. So it implies that it's a kind of a shocking image for him. Or it's almost beautiful, and amongst all this death and dying, it's almost beautiful. Which, in a sense, you can understand now why he is so bewildered and why he is so suddenly awaking and stumbling. Can't fit it in. Almost beautiful, it's meant to say. We've got some lovely, lovely imagery created, sound imagery, especially in this poem. And one of the best lines, in my opinion, is "Bullets smack the belly out of the air," because you can really imagine that sound of smacking your belly and how that would almost sound like the bullets cracking through the air. It's that cracking sound. So we've got a nice onomatopoeia here. Which is a sound imagery when the word makes the sound. Also, this smacking the belly out of the air, we've all had that feeling of being winded. Again, is he winded by the shock, by his fear? So it's a really lovely idea. That the sound creates that feeling for us as well as the reader. The next line, another beautiful bit of imagery, quite uncomfortable to read, but shows how brilliant Hughes was and why he was the poet laureate for so long. It says here he lugged a rifle numb as a smashed arm. So yeah, of course, these guys would be wearing their uniform all the time, probably sleeping in it as well, so that they were ready to fight. And so this rifle, it shows how heavy it is and uncomfortable. But also, this part of the simile here, as a smashed arm, is obviously, you can't help but imagine that injury that perhaps people he's seen around as he's fighting. He's seen people getting their arms smashed. Numb is also a really lovely word for the writer to have used here, because we can imagine feeling numb, sort of emotionally as well as physically, from everything that he's seeing. It's numbing his emotions. I suppose at a certain point you're kind of, what are they called? Your own kind of mechanisms inside you will kick in and realise it's almost too much. Your defence mechanism, that's it. So in bewilderment, he almost stopped. This is in that middle stanza where everything kind of slows down. You've got that in the cold clockwork of the stars and the nations, everything really goes into slow motion, and it's like he's realising. So he almost stopped. Obviously he can't stop because he'll die, but he's realising. He's seeing all of this for what it is. He's seeing the truth that the government have lied to him. And we get again this image, yellow hair that rolled like a flame. This innocent creature is also caught up in all of this and has become, the yellow hair, the hair juxtaposes with flame. Rolled is almost quite a humorous image. Again, he's bringing in that dark humour, the dazzling hedge. It's almost beautiful, but actually it's being destroyed. This yellow hair rolling like a flame. It's almost beautiful, almost ridiculous, almost funny, but actually it's really rather brutal and sad that these things are dying. I guess one of the most important lines in this poem, king, honour, human dignity, etc., dropped like luxuries in a yelling alarm. So the whole quote's important, but this part, if it's the only part you can remember, is also useful. You can imagine these things, the propaganda that would have been rammed down their throats. You know, you're doing this for your king, you're doing this for your honour, you're doing this for human dignity. But he just straight away belittles all of that, or he's almost sarcastic about its importance. Because ultimately, when you're there on the battlefield, do you care about king? Do you care about honour? Do you care about human dignity? No, you probably just care about staying alive. So this list here that he gives us belittles and shows how that is just not important when you're out there fighting for your life. Love a bit of alliteration here, the last line. And what it does, again, is it passes on that feeling to the reader, how the person in the poem is feeling. Terror's touchy dynamite. It feels uncomfortable. It's almost like his terror is a piece of stick of dynamite that could explode at any minute. He's so uncomfortable, he's so on edge. So, quite a bleak poem, definitely. A man who's falling out of love with his country and the reasons, and with war really, that why am I actually here? So, obvious question, which I think I already set at the end of Exposure, would be to compare Bayonet Charge and Exposure, talking about conflict. But to keep it different question each time, I think we'll do this time Bayonet Charge with a different war poem, and we will compare it with the Charge of the Light Brigade, and we'll talk about how the poet presents war. Simple as that. So this poem would go really nicely with other war poems, but also it would go quite nicely with poems talking about inner conflict and how conflicted you feel when you've maybe been lied to, or when you've got different things going on in your head than you thought. Things didn't turn out the way you thought they might, for example. Okay, so that is the end of that video. If you've got anything to add, please do so in the comments and let's get a discussion going, because poetry is always best when it's discussed. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.